Hey everybody, today I get to teach you about digital trace data. And that's a really exciting subject. Anytime I talk about digital trace data, I like to look at this picture. This picture of human civilization from outer space. Why are we looking at human civilization from outer space? Well, the answer is we have to read some Duncan Watts. And I quote, "Just as the invention of the telescope revolutionized the study of the heavens, so too by rendering the unmeasurable measurable, the technological revolution in mobile, web, and internet communications has the potential to revolutionize our understanding of ourselves and how we interact." 300 years after Alexander Pope argued that the proper study of mankind should lie not in the heavens but in ourselves, we have finally found our telescope. Let the revolution begin. Inspiring words, right? And in case you're wondering, I always keep quotations from Duncan Watts in my pocket. But seriously, I love this quote. And by the way, Duncan Watts has been saying this for a decade, and way ahead of his time. He saw what few other people saw, which is that the moment we're in, the unprecedented amount of data collected from social media sites, internet search data, telecommunications, geospatial data, was going to give us a telescope, was going to give us a new way of tracking human behavior. Let's look at some other examples. First, let's check out this interesting paper by Eagle et al. From 2012. And this is one of the first high-profile applications of what we now call digital trace data, or what some people call digital footprints. The idea here is, as people are interacting with technology, we are leaving behind digital traces of our own behavior. This may come in the form of text-based data. It may come in the form of, again, internet search data. In this case, the researchers worked with a telecommunications company in Britain to try to map every phone call in the entire country. At the time, this was a really remarkable thing to do. The idea that you could plot a country with data was something that was just, frankly, exciting for many of us old folks. Okay, so what else could they do? That's the really interesting thing, right? We don't need data to make a map. We've got maps. What can we learn from the data? Well, in this case, they were able to study how people's network diversity, patterns in the types of people they were connected to on social media, were linked to economic inequality and diversity. A really interesting study that not only showed us the potential of the data to map large patterns of human behavior, but to start to discover insights about what's driving that behavior, how we sort together into groups, into communities, and even into societies. More recently, we've been able to use these types of data to look at how societies interact with each other. So 2 years ago, I set out to track the globalization of culture with Google search data with Columbia sociologist Andreas Wimmer and Duke PhD student Taylor Brown. And what we did is we were able to capture every single top search term in every single country going back 14 years. And we were able to produce charts like this that allow us to disentangle where certain products, ideas, entertainment, memes travel across the world. For the first time, providing digital precision to a literature that had previously relied on, say, where McDonald's decides to open up a new franchise as an indicator of where ideas and culture are traveling. So again, another example of how we can use these digital footprints, these digital traces, to try to make sense of large-scale human behavior. A more recent, really impressive example is the abundance of mobile phone data, smartphone data, advertising data generated from Google and other sources in order to track things like shelter-in-place orders in the age of COVID-19. So here we're seeing data from a company called SafeGraph. The dashboard for this is linked below if you want to check it out. And here what we're seeing is counties in the US colored by how many minutes people are spending inside their home. How are they getting this data? Well, for a subsample of smartphone users in each county, they're tracking the number of times people move outside a certain geographic region. Really unprecedented stuff. So now with these data, maybe years from now, maybe weeks from now, the way this field grows so quickly, we'll be able to know where were people following directives, where were they not, and what were the consequences for the spread of disease. We, even with these data, will be able to track whether people are crossing into new census tracts and zip codes in order to develop more sophisticated models of the contagion of disease. And there's a whole field of social science and epidemiology related to this that draws upon social network analysis. Social networks are also illuminated by digital trace data in really unprecedented ways. We not only have many more of them, we have much larger networks. So to sum up, digital trace data is large digital data that describe human behavior. Often large-scale human behavior, but not always. These data tend to come from social media sites, from internet search archives, from administrative records, historical archives, and audiovisual or geospatial data, any type of trace we leave behind. And one point I want to make here is that not all of this data is coming from sites like Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, even though those sites are producing, in some cases, tremendous amounts of data that we're going to learn about in future lectures. But these data are also enabling time travel, right? Things like the Internet Archive has a tool that I'm going to teach you how to access that allows you to visit any web page as it existed a year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, enabling you to travel both forwards and backwards in time as you try to trace out large-scale trends in human behavior. But we're not really limited to the last 10 years. As the digitization of nearly everything spreads across nearly every book in most large human languages, vast historical archives, photography, digital evidence, and audiovisual sources, archives of television shows or other types of media historically, we're dealing with an unprecedented telescope to look at the past with. So this is something we can all really get excited about. Now, I'm making these data sound great, and a telescope is a wonderful analogy, but as we'll learn in the following lectures, these data are hardly perfect. Usually, as social scientists, we're dealing with something that Matt Salganik calls custom-made data. We want to make some beautiful piece of science, and whether our science looks anywhere near as beautiful as Michelangelo here is, well, that's in the eye of the beholder. But Matt's point in using this example is a really nice one. What he's saying, I think, is that usually a social scientist, when they want to study a problem, they go out in the world, they diagnose it, they develop a really careful research design. They think about things like sampling, who's going to answer, how are they going to answer, how are they going to interpret a survey question, or maybe they're going out doing interviews with people and thinking very carefully about how their presentation as a researcher is going to affect what people say. Yeah. And in so doing, we're able to make meticulous measures that were clearly designed to measure the concepts that we want to study, right? Now, let's go back to our first example, the data from Eagle and Michael Macy and others, right? Really cool data. Undeniably, for the first time, we can map large-scale human behavior. But what are we missing? Are these ties described by these telephone communication patterns as intimate as the friendship networks that people might describe themselves? Or are people, say, calling, collection agencies and waiting on hold? We simply don't know. And at scale, we often can't know. And even worse, the people who produced the data didn't make it for social science purposes. They made it usually for some kind of business purpose, right? And in fact, as we'll learn about in future lectures, we're at a critical juncture in the field of computational social science where much of the best data is hidden behind companies' doors. And we're working hard to illuminate new ways to work with industry partners in order to look at that data. But in the meantime, we have to accept what trickles out from Twitter, what trickles out from a site like Reddit, right? We can't get everything. We can't know everybody that's producing the data or how they're producing it, right? So really, these data are more like ready-made data. They're data that we're borrowing, that we're repurposing for something else. And again, to make another kind of grandiose comparison, we're doing what Picasso did with this bike handlebar and bike seat, right? To someone else, it's just a bike handlebar and a bike seat. But Picasso saw a bull, right? Now, again, whether you think this is more beautiful than Michelangelo by David, that's in the eye of the beholder. But one of the things I'm going to try to teach you about in the next set of lectures is that these data have tremendous strengths and tremendous weaknesses. And those who succeed, the most promising young computational social scientists, are going to find ways of taking advantage of the strengths and addressing the weaknesses, probably through mixes of new and old data.